Some of us have been here for a long time, but I am so grateful to see a huge audience, marvelous support. Thank you. We are about to enter our 6th round of the One Day Academy Thesis Defense Presentation Semifinals. And before we do, I'd like to introduce our distinguished panel of judges for today. We have Miss Ginger Umstadt. She's the co-founder of the Austin Rhetoric Club. She's a homeschool mom of 24 years. Hats off to you, Mom. Mom of 5, and a former professional gospel singer and actress. Thank you so much, Ginger, for joining our panel. We have Mr. Philip Witt. He is an Austin native and a graduate of Howard Payne University and a software engineer. Thank you very much, Philip, for joining us. And Mr. Matthew Peisker. He is a business and political science major at Howard Payne University and a sales manager and financial advisor with Bankers Life. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us. And without any further ado, we'd like to introduce our next presenter, Miss Celeste Haggard, who will be presenting the case for the regulation of the photoshopping of models. Celeste, the floor is yours.
Don't worry about feeling good or being good. Worry about looking good. You have to suffer to be beautiful. Oh, you're so beautiful is what little girls hear today, not you're so smart or you're so kind. These messages of beauty are constantly preached by mass media and pop culture. Everywhere you turn, media is exposing you to images that influence your idea of what is beautiful. Media tells us that beauty is long legs, a thigh gap, perfect hair, a tiny waist, sparkling white teeth, and flawless skin. In 1913, Webster's dictionary defined beauty as properties pleasing the eye, the ear, the intellect, the aesthetic faculty, or the moral sense. In 2015, Webster's primary definition of beauty is the quality of being physically attractive. No longer does the definition of beauty rely on pleasing the ear, the intellect, or the moral sense. Instead, beauty has become solely visual. The meaning of true beauty has shattered. America needs laws and regulations regarding modeling and advertising agencies. These agencies should be banned from using Photoshop to physically alter models' bodies and should not be allowed to use models who are underweight. Models should be required to pass the World Health Organization standards for being healthy before they are allowed to model. Currently, pop culture and media uses models who are underweight and then Photoshop out any imperfection. This has created a warped and unrealistic standard of beauty. By regulating the use of Photoshop and requiring that models be at a healthy weight to maintain their job, women everywhere will be encouraged to return to the natural definition of beauty. That is, the fact that we were all made beautiful in the eyes of our Creator. Beauty has always been valued in society. In fact, human perception of beauty can be traced back to Cleopatra, who was born in 69 BC. As Mark Tungate puts it, Cleopatra is perhaps the earliest example of an icon of beauty, a precursor of the smooth-browed goddesses who gaze at us from advertising posters today. The Greek historian Plutarch, however, writes that her beauty was not altogether incomparable. Yet nevertheless, in her portraits, she is depicted as beautiful. This could hint that images and portraits were altered even in Cleopatra's time. While ideas of what is beautiful have shifted from culture to culture and from time to time, beauty has always been worshipped. The Greeks believed that beauty lay in natural harmony, symmetry, and moderation, not the application of face paint, as modern-day makeup was known back then. The Romans had a different view of beauty. They held the lighter skin in high esteem, since darker skin was a trait of those who labored out in the sun all day. To achieve an even lighter skin tone, Romans would whiten their skin with ceruse, a white lead used to change someone's pigment, despite the knowledge that long-term use damaged the skin, blackened the teeth, and wreaked havoc within the nervous system, leading, quite literally, to a deathly pallor. They were willing to go to the edge of death to be considered beautiful. In the 1800s, Max Beerbohm wrote an essay entitled A Defense of Cosmetics, in which he stated that the use of pigments was becoming general, and most women were not so young as they were painted. In the 19th century, a uniform standard of beauty was shown across the entire country, driven by the widening circulation of magazines and advertisements. Cosmetics and creams and products claiming to make women more beautiful began to spread all across the nation, as women quickly became intent on replicating the images they saw in magazines. Entrepreneurs who claimed to meet this need began to make huge profits. In 1914, when Helena Rubinstein came to New York, she revolutionized the idea of beauty. Rubinstein was the first beauty specialist to classify skin as dry, normal, or oily. She sold a product, Cream Glaze, which she advertised to improve the worst of skin in 1 month. This was the first of a collection of treatment creams the beauty-conscious consumer felt they needed to purchase. In Lindy Woodhead's 2003 book, War Paint, she writes that women began to feel that their skin conditions, whether wrinkles or blemishes or shininess, were an indication that something was wrong and that buying creams could make it right. By selling the idea of what one must look like to be beautiful, companies have scared consumers into feeling that they must use their products in order to be beautiful. Today's women are in a never-ending, inevitably futile attempt to achieve the ultimate unreality: Photoshop. Beyond the use of makeups and creams to alter one's appearance, modeling and advertising agencies have employed Photoshop to further create a warped reality. Although digital technology has democratized the ability to alter fake photos, photo manipulation dates back to the beginning of photography. Long before computers, photo manipulation was practiced by retouching images using double exposures, ink, or paint, by piercing negatives or photos together in photo development rooms or dark rooms, or by scratching Polaroids. One of the earliest examples of photo manipulation dates back to the 1860s. Matthew Brady, a famous Civil War photographer, altered a photo of President Abraham Lincoln, combining Lincoln's head with the body of a John C. Calhoun photograph. In the 1980s, the concept of digital retouching was born with the application known as Paintbox, which allowed scanned images to be edited and retouched. The late 1980s witnessed the advent of an application known as Barcode Creator, which further allowed images to be manipulated. Finally, these applications were replaced when Thomas and John Knoll signed a licensed agreement with Adobe and released Photoshop 1.0 in February 1990. Although initially marketed to graphic designers and other pre-press professionals who were already using programs through Adobe, Photoshop was soon adopted by commercial photographers for use in fashion and advertising. As it stands, Photoshop is the driving force behind digital manipulation today. The fact that the term Photoshop is considered a generic verb in the English language is a testament to how common the use of Photoshop has become. Continuing the use of Photoshop to alter models' bodies is destructive, and if companies keep using underweight models, more people will develop issues with their self-image. 20 years ago, the average fashion model weighed 8% less than the average woman. Today, she weighs 23% less. In 1894, the average United States female model was 5'4" and 140 pounds. These proportions now reflect the average female woman, but the average model is 5'10" and 110 pounds. Consider the fact that the body portrayed in advertising as the ideal is possessed naturally by only 5% of American women. Modeling and advertising agencies need to use models at a healthy weight because this unrealistic standard has caused about 3/4 of women who are at or below a normal and healthy weight to believe they should lose some. In today's society, adolescents' expectations and desires are so consistently determined by media and advertising. In a study conducted by the National Association for Anorexia Nervosa and Associated Disorders, 81% of 10-year-olds are afraid of becoming fat, and 42% of 1st through 3rd grade girls want to be thinner. Girls seeing these manipulated images feel they must fit into that standard to be beautiful. By the age of 13, 53% of American girls are unhappy with their bodies. By 17, 78% are dissatisfied. Furthermore, 69% of girls in 5th through 12th grade reported that the images in magazines influenced their idea of a perfect body shape. And 50% of these girls reported a desire to lose weight because of the images they saw in magazines. On average, women are exposed to 2,000 advertisements per week, and advertisers spend $15 billion, double the amount spent 10 years ago on marketing to kids. Companies need to stop using underweight models because the models currently used are not representative of, nor a healthy example for, women in America. Taking the body mass index into account, a height to weight ratio measured in kilograms per meter squared, a healthy BMI ranges on a scale from 18.5 to 24.9. The BMI of the average model who weighs 110 pounds at 5'10" is less than 16. Clearly, the average model does not have a healthy BMI, yet these models continue to appear in magazines and advertisements everywhere. We are taking in these images, and whether consciously or not, they are shaping our idea of what is beautiful. As a little girl, author Maria Hornbacher used to imagine herself as the model she saw in magazines, tan and long and thin. After struggling with anorexia and bulimia for 14 long years, Maria is a testament to the influence of the cultural environment and the rise and popularity of eating disorders. She states that she cannot help but think, had she lived in a culture where thinness was not regarded in such high esteem, she would not have suffered through 14 years of eating disorders and seriously damaged her body. Today, 8 million women in America have eating disorders. These illnesses are on the rise, and the average age of sufferers is dropping rapidly, with problems showing up in girls as young as 9. While eating disorders are not caused solely by these photoshopped images, these pathologies thrive in an environment in which so many people spend so much money and work so hard to achieve the perfect body. Not only is it damaging to consumers to see underweight models as the standard of beauty, it is also damaging to the models themselves. In 2006, Luisa Ramos, an Uruguayan model, starved herself for her career and was rewarded with heart failure that killed her at the age of 22. A mere 3 months after the death of Luisa, 21-year-old Brazilian model Ana Carolina Reston also died of complications resulting from anorexia. A year after Luisa's death, Eliana Ramos, Luisa's younger sister, also a model and only 18 years old, was found dead at her grandparents' home, having suffered a heart attack linked to malnutrition. In 2010, French model Isabella Caro's life was claimed by anorexia nervosa. Within weeks of her death, Caro's mom, devastated by grief, committed suicide. Within months of the deaths of these models, the fashion capitals of Madrid, Milan, and Sao Paulo implemented new runway procedures, requiring the participating models pass a doctor's examination or meet a minimum BMI of 18. Israel's top fashion photographer, Adi Barkin, and Israeli parliament member Rachel Adato championed a law in 2012 that required the fashion and advertising industry to ban underweight models as determined by BMI, and also regulated the use of Photoshop. Barkin believes that images of underweight models can contribute to eating disorders like anorexia and bulimia in teen girls. And he worked to pass this law because he was not only concerned with the impact these unrealistic images can have on the public, but also with the risk to underweight models. Additionally, in France, members of French Parliament realized the effects of these images and proposed that a health warning label be stamped on images of models that have been photoshopped. Valérie Boyer, a member of French Parliament, proposed that any published image that has been digitally enhanced must come with a warning label which reads, "Retouched photograph aimed at changing a person's physical appearance." Companies that failed to comply could be fined up to 50% of the cost of the publicity campaign. While French members of Parliament simply worked to put a warning label on photoshopped images, British members of Parliament both required disclosure of digital alterations in ads aimed at adults and banned Photoshop in ads aimed at children. Joe Swinson, a member of British Parliament, says, "Photoshop means that magazines and advertisements contain completely unattainable, perfect images that no one can live up to in real life. We need to protect our children from these pressures, and we need to make a start by banning Photoshop and ads aimed at them." In 2011, the American Medical Association announced it was taking a stand against digital manipulation in photos, stating that alterations made through processes like Photoshop can contribute to unrealistic body image expectations, low self-esteem, and eating disorders, particularly in female adolescents. Although, while other countries have implemented specific laws to regulate this, America has not yet implemented any laws concerning Photoshop. However, certain companies have taken a stand against this unrealistic image of beauty. The most prominent is the Dove Real Beauty campaign. In 2004, Dove conducted a study of more than 3,000 women of all different ages in 10 different countries to understand how women define beauty, how satisfied they are with their beauty, how they feel about female beauty's portrayal in society, and how beauty affects their well-being. The study revealed that only 2% of women who were interviewed claimed to be beautiful. Furthermore, 4 in 10 women strongly agreed that they do not feel comfortable describing themselves as beautiful. Thus, not only are women unlikely to choose the word beautiful when describing their appearance, but almost half of all women feel uncomfortable with even associating themselves with the word beautiful. More than 2/3 of the women in the study strongly agreed that media and advertising set an ideal of beauty that most women can't ever attain. 75% of the women in this study indicated a desire to see women of varying shapes, diverse sizes, and of a broader age range than in the women which currently saturate our visual field. It is based off of this study that Dove built their campaign for real beauty. Just as women lay some of the blame for the perpetuation of inauthentic beauty on mass media and pop culture, they also believe that mass media can be a force for reconfiguring our culture so that true beauty becomes the new standard. In 2007, a feature of Dove's campaign was an online video called Evolution. The title was designed to represent the transformation someone undergoes when photoshopped. The video featured a rather ordinary teenage girl with natural flaws. As the video plays, a time-lapse sequence demonstrates how makeup, hairstyling, and crucially, Photoshop alterations transform her from the girl next door into the kind of goddess we're used to seeing in beauty ads. No wonder our perception of beauty is distorted, the final line of the video comments. Since Dove's Real Beauty campaign, other companies have taken a stand against the unrealistic image of beauty and the extreme use of Photoshop that is pervasive throughout today's society. Major companies and brands like ModCloth, Hot Topic, H&M, Forever 21, and American Eagle have fought against our culture's limited definition of beauty and have chosen to use women of all different shapes and sizes, supporting a wider definition of beauty and attracting a plethora of women to support their stores. While society has promoted an ideal of beauty that is completely made up, high maintenance, costly, and nearly impossible to attain, these companies have taken a stand against our culture's limited definition of beauty and supported an honest and authentic definition of beauty. Today's culture does not seek to celebrate the body in its natural state. Rather, achieving beauty requires expensive procedures and treatments like exfoliation, facials, liposuction, highlights, spray tans, tooth bleaching, Botox injections, manicures and pedicures, trendy jewelry, clothing from posh boutiques, and experts such as wardrobe stylists and dermatologists. Despite the extent to which one must go to be considered beautiful by society, there are still people and companies who believe that nothing about the ideal of beauty promoted in media needs to be changed. They state that if we changed the ideal of beauty and supported a wider definition of beauty, countless companies could go out of business. The world currently spends $38 billion on hair care products, $24 billion on skincare products, and $18 billion on makeup. Companies selling beauty products, professional photoshoppers, and countless underweight models could lose their jobs, they claim. And money from these companies could be lost. However, statistics show differently. When Dove launched their campaign for real beauty, rather than losing money, Dove sales increased by as much as 700%. Additionally, for underweight models, it could be the difference between losing their job or losing their life, especially if models' weight continues on its downward trend. The ideal of female beauty currently seen in media rarely occurs without restrictive dieting, excessive exercise, and cosmetic surgery. Women who internalize this ideal often have unrealistic aspirations and unhealthy habits. Consider Fiji. Fiji's culture had long valued robust bodies and had almost no instance of eating disorders. However, the power of the images presented by the media was undeniably illustrated with the introduction of television into Fiji in the 1990s. Within 3 years after television viewing became common, eating disorders had risen drastically, as women quickly became intent on replicating the figures they saw. Additionally, as articles and ads on weight loss in women's magazines have risen, women's ideal weight has fallen. Studies show that frequent exposure to media images and diet articles is associated with heightened anxiety and unhappiness concerning appearance, as well as eating disorders, particularly in female adolescents. Pascal Dangan, the founder and head of one of the most renowned photo retouching firms in the United States, defended Photoshop and image manipulation, as he told a reporter. Everyone wants to look good. Basically, we're selling a product. We're selling an image. To those who say, too much retouching, I say, you are bogus. This is the world we're living in. The world is not reality. It's just paper. Pascal Dangan is one of many others who hold the belief that the problem does not lie within the manipulated images, but within our own personal failure to alter our expectations of these images. Mass media points out that everything nowadays is altered, and we just need to accept this. rather than asking modeling and advertising agencies to use different models and regulate the use of Photoshop. However, simply educating people on the fact that the images they are being exposed to have been manipulated does not counteract the effects of exposure. The camera-enhanced Photoshop body is everywhere, on magazines, billboards, advertisements, in movies, and even on television. Even if we know the images are fake, we are still seduced by what we see, and we measure ourselves by the images around us. As countless studies show, the more time we spend immersed in contemporary media, the more likely we are to obsess about our appearance or develop disordered eating behavior. Requiring that the images media presents be authentic through regulating the use of Photoshop and requiring models to be at a healthy weight can redefine society's perception of beauty. Whereas culture sees beauty as a valuable commodity distributed among a few rare individuals, God sees beauty in every individual. In order to allow the idea of beauty to become inclusive, beauty itself must be redefined to show women in their true, unaltered beauty, rather than showcasing fictitious, manipulated images. Society's perception of beauty is fleeting and ever-changing. Different cultures have chased after different ideals of beauty from century to century, and even from decade to decade. Beauty, as society defines it, means constantly chasing a dream that is impossible to attain. However, we are made in God's unchanging image. Society needs to stop pressuring girls, teens, and women to look a certain way. Do not allow yourself to fall victim to society's perception of beauty. Aim to influence society, to redefine beauty, to include all women. God made us all unique, and if we allow society to determine who can be considered beautiful, then the uniqueness that God has given each of us will be left to atrophy. If we spent more time focusing on our relationship with God than on our appearance, the world would be a better place. As Proverbs 31:30 states, "Charm is deceptive, and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Worldly beauty is temporary and will wither away, but inner beauty will never fade." As 1 Peter 3:3-4 states, "Do not concern yourself with the outward beauty of fancy hairstyles, expensive jewelry, and beautiful clothes. You should clothe yourselves instead with the beauty that comes from within, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is so precious to God." Thank you.
Thank you, Celeste. And now we will begin our question and answer session with our panelists whenever you are ready.
Okay, I'll start. Good job, by the way.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it very much. I did have a few questions. Okay, so how do you feel about what at least was very common when I was, many years ago, a high school graduate, and since you're in that position, how do you feel about retouching high school photographs to remove blemishes for a yearbook?
I do not support that, since it is altering the truth of the photo, and I believe that that's unnecessary, and again, it's promoting something that's not realistic, and I believe that we should be promoting truth in these photos instead of manipulating them.
Okay, so you would support perhaps a law to outlaw that, or just a
Yes.
suggestion that it not be done?
Yes, I'm saying that we should create a law to ban the use of Photoshop to physically alter someone's appearance, and that also we need to have companies stop using underweight models as they appear in magazines and advertisements.
Okay, so as what would you say to someone who is perhaps hesitant about increased government control in a general sense? What about the idea of government control versus internal control? You gave the example that Dove has this Real Beauty campaign, and so it sounds like the industry is already beginning to adjust to this problem, and that they're beginning to try to solve the problem themselves. And you said yourself that because they have started this campaign, their sales have increased, and that it's been very positively received. So if this is happening within the private sector, is it really necessary, and why would we want to come down with a hard government law?
I do believe that Dove's campaign is a step in the right direction, but just because one company has made that change doesn't mean that the other companies are willingly going to follow along. And actually, statistics show that currently in the modeling agency, 40% of these models have eating disorders, and additionally, 64% of the models are being told by the photographers that they need to lose weight, even though they're already underweight. And I don't believe these people's mindsets are going to change on their own, which is why I believe that the government does need to create a law, because although Dove has changed, I don't think that that's going to influence the rest of the industry to change on its own.
And why is it that you think this won't be followed? Since they're having so much success, usually companies want to do anything that will create success. And since Dove is having success in this, what makes you think that other companies will not follow suit?
I think they've just gotten themselves in the mindset that they have to be promoting the ideal of skinny, tall, and tan models, and even though Dove has changed, they don't see themselves going in that direction, and they believe that they can make more money through promoting that ideal, because since it is such an unrealistic ideal, it's causing people to spend that much more money on procedures and makeups and creams to make them look like the models they see in advertising and in that industry. And those companies believe that they're going to make more money that way. So even though Dove sales have increased, I still don't believe that other companies are willingly going to follow along with that.
Have you done any research to follow that up with evidence?
There isn't any specific evidence along that, other than that the companies, clearly, most companies aren't like Dove's Real Beauty campaign. If you look in magazines and advertisements, you're still going to see photoshopped images, and those companies don't have any indication of changing anytime soon. And as you can see in the quote from Pascal Dankin, who was the founder and head of one of the most renowned retouching firms in the United States, actually defended the use of Photoshop, and he said that if you think Photoshop and underweight models are too much, then you're the one who's bogus, not the images. So the people in these industries are very stubborn about what they believe and the ideal of beauty that they're promoting, and so there's no indication of them changing anytime soon.
Okay, I have a few more questions, but I will let you keep
Yeah.
going if you want.
I was just gonna, so you said, I've heard it twice now, you said, after Dove's campaign, Real Beauty campaign, they had a 700% increase in sales. What's your source on that?
It's from Dove itself, actually. They had a study that they conducted, and they had tons of research from their campaign that was posted through Dove.
So they had their sales from when they started the campaign went up 700%.
They went up as much as 700%.
So if Dove's sales went up 700%, obviously they now have a very large advantage over their competitors. They're obviously going to be taking up a large portion of the market. Would you think that the other companies then would want to follow suit with something like that so they can catch up to Dove if it's really 700%?
I believe that for Dove, it's easier for them to change and promote a more natural idea of beauty because they sell soaps and shampoos and conditioners and things like that. It's easier to return to a more natural definition of beauty through that. And these other companies are promoting makeups and cosmetics and creams and cosmetic surgery and things like that. And so for that, it's harder to return to the natural definition of beauty. So I think because of what Dove is selling, that's what was able to make their sales increase that much, because they're selling soaps and natural products that everyone needs to use. So their sales increased because of that reason, I believe.
So would you perhaps be in favor of a 29th Amendment to the Constitution that put limitations on the First Amendment? Because that's what I'm kind of hearing here, is that the First Amendment grants protections to private citizens, subsequently private businesses. And I mean, so long as a company is not making blatant false claims on an advertisement, they're protected under the First Amendment, and so
Freedom of the press.
right.
I think, actually, if companies, since they're using Photoshop right now, and if the products that they actually used actually had the look and effect that they're claiming to have, then they wouldn't need to use Photoshop to compensate for the failings of their own products. So currently, right now, what's being promoted in these images is fraud, because the products that they're selling through these images aren't achieving the look they claim that they're having, because they're still having to use Photoshop on these models. So as far as the free market goes, technically, these images are promoting fraud, and fraud obviously is not accepted in America.
Well, it also falls under things like movie posters. Star Wars. It's entirely Photoshopped and entirely computer generated, and it fall into the same law, and so there's the consequence of passing these laws and having a strong government influence that over-regulates. That's why the First Amendment exists, and so I guess the only way to do that would be the 29th Amendment. Is that kind of what you're...
Potentially, although I believe that since what they're promoting is technically considered fraud, that's already covered, and that America does not accept fraud, and that's not legal to advertise fraudulent things. So I don't know that we would have to go as far as to create another amendment to regulate this, but I do think that a law needs to be passed.
What about the concept of, oh, am I interrupting?
No, go ahead.
What about the concept of art? So in the Middle Ages, there were lots of statues and artwork of, the birth of Venus, and you mentioned yourself, Cleopatra was portrayed more beautifully than one of the more realistic, perhaps, or honest historians said, well, she wasn't that great. But the pictures of her were all beautiful, and that is considered and come through the ages as art. So are you suggesting that anything that is not completely 100% photorealistic should be banned in the art community as well?
I'm
And
not.
where would you draw the line?
I'm not advocating completely banning the use of Photoshop in everything, just in advertisements and things where they're using Photoshop to physically alter someone's bodies, because little girls and teens and women are looking at that and seeing that as the ideal standard of beauty, and it's obviously, as you can see by the statistics, damaging to their health. So I'm not against Photoshop for other art projects or things like that, but as far as it comes to physically changing and altering someone's appearance, I believe that that is where the line needs to be drawn for using Photoshop.
So there's a viral video going around on YouTube and Facebook that's of this really talented male makeup artist who's able to transform himself into a wide array of people from Cher and Beyonce. And so he's not using Photoshop for that, so would you also extend it to perhaps ban makeup?
I think banning makeup would be a little extreme, and I think not many people would react well to that. However, I do think makeup should be used in moderation. I don't think we could create a specific law regarding that, though, because people would find other ways to make their own makeup or things like that. So I don't think we should go as far as to create a law banning makeup. I just think we should encourage people to use it in moderation, and through not having these images be photoshopped and requiring models to be at a healthy weight, that can encourage people to realize that they don't need makeup to be beautiful, but we can't create a law that tells people that they must be able to feel beautiful without makeup. I just think through this, though, we can encourage people to realize that makeup should be used in moderation and not excessively.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes.
Last week, this is the Duchess of Kent, Prince William's wife, gave birth.
Yes.
And a lot of women my age on my Facebook feed was talking about how can you possibly look that good in heels less than 24 hours after giving birth. And there was this whole discussion about the fact that she had hairstylists and that she had done natural or largely natural childbirth, and so that made it easier for her to not have swollen ankles and all this stuff that might not appeal to you, but my generation was like really into reading this article and commenting on it. So she presented to the world an amazing presentation that was, to most of us, very unrealistic of a postpartum woman. And so obviously her pictures, as far as I know, were not photoshopped, but she had a hairstylist, she had a makeup artist, she had all the pampering that most of us don't have opportunity to have, and we usually come out of the hospital look like we've been through a war. For reasons you'll learn someday. So, so I'm just wondering, is there anything that you would do? And what I'm saying is, not everybody has opportunities to have a professional hairstylist or a professional makeup artist or someone to do your wardrobe, to do all of those things, and so that gives her an unfair advantage compared to the rest of the world. And she presented what was an unfair image of a postpartum woman who just looked incredibly fabulous in her yellow dress. So what's your comment on that?
I think as far as an unfair advantage goes, just as you could say someone who perhaps has more intelligence than another person has an unfair advantage in life, it is what it is, and you can't take away her money and so that she can't afford those things. So I think as far as that goes, although it might seem unfair, she's not, if, as the ad claimed, her image wasn't photoshopped, then I don't feel like there's much of an unfair advantage
Okay.
in that.
Okay. Did you in your research ever look at what men's responses to models and advertising is? I'm just curious. I know my own husband has his opinion, but I'm not supposed to fill you up with my anecdotes. So I'd rather hear just if you've researched that or if you have any idea. Because so far you've pretty much been talking about the effects on women.
Right.
Is there any response from men?
As far as my research goes, I didn't focus as much on men since the gist of my thesis was women, and it would probably take a whole nother thesis to describe the effects of it on men. But from the research into that I have done, it's both affecting men's perception of what a woman should look like to be beautiful, and so it's changed their perception of women's beauty. And even in men's articles, it features buff, muscular men, and that's also causing men to believe that they must be like the men they're seeing in magazines as well. But it doesn't seem to have as strong of an effect on men yet, because women's articles actually feature 10 times as many articles concerning diet and things like that than men's magazines, so the greater effect is on women as opposed to men.
Have you considered the parallels this has to other industries, such as advertisements for cars, for homes, advertisements for products where the images are altered, where they put it on a race, like a course, where most people have the opportunity to take that car, and they see stunt drivers doing things. That's just an example of a parallel. What are your thoughts on that, on the parallels that this would have for other industries as well that alter images?
I think that through doing this, it could encourage other industries to also resort to not photoshopping images and promoting a more realistic standard, because as these other companies resort to a more honest image that hasn't been manipulated, I feel like that could influence these cultures or these other industries to do that. But I don't think that that's necessarily as likely, since if you have a photo of, say, a hamburger that's been photoshopped into something that's not what it is in real life, I don't think that doesn't have any physical or mental or emotional detrimental effect to the public, so I don't think that that's as big of a concern.
Why do you think it wouldn't have a detrimental effect on the public? By having altered images of products that people are going to go out and buy because they see it that way?
I believe that as far as commercials, like you said, concerning cars or maybe furniture and things like that, those aren't featuring, in these advertisements and magazines, they're featuring physical humans who have been altered, and people are looking at that as the standard of beauty, which is causing them to go to extreme measures to be considered beautiful. But when someone sees a piece of furniture or a car, those advertisements aren't telling someone that they must look a certain way, and it's not mentally or physically causing them to do things to change their physical appearance.
But could they not be telling someone that they need to buy this Audi so that they have a cool car, or they need to shop at this store because that's where you're supposed to shop, or this is things like that? Don't you think that, would you admit that other advertisements also push the same message, that you need to follow this to be cool, to fit in, to be
I believe
fashionable?
that those can promote messages that you must have whatever they are advertising. You must own that car, you must have a house that looks like this, you must go on vacations like we're showing you. But I don't think that that is as detrimental as these images of Photoshop models, because in these images of models, it's causing the public to develop eating disorders, to have cosmetic surgeries, to buy makeups and products and creams, and spend all of this money on their appearance, which is mentally detrimental to them because it's promoted that in their mind. But cars and furniture and things like that aren't as detrimental because it's not causing someone to look negatively at themselves and their appearance.
Oh, just like one follow-up.
Yes.
The household debt ratio in the U.S. right now is an all-time high. Do you think part of that problem is the advertisements people see for things that they need to buy, and perhaps debt is detrimental as well?
I believe that can be because, as I stated in my thesis, the world is currently spending $38 billion on hair care products, $24 billion on skincare, and $18 billion on makeup. And that's a lot of money to be spending on these products and cosmetics that affect your appearance. So I believe that that does play a role in the debt, if that answers your question.
I guess what I was getting at was the debt that people are accumulating to purchase luxury automobiles and homes, larger homes and things like that, which definitely is a lot more than $18 billion, and so wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Your question is the effect that the debt has on the public?
Or the advertising,
the advertisements.
how significant of an impact it has to get people to buy things that they might not have bought.
I think the point of advertising is to help people feel that they need to purchase the things that are being advertised. So I do believe that the advertisements have led people to spend all of that money and possibly go into debt, because that's the point of advertisements, to force you into feeling that you must use these products.
So a negative effect that's been had, is that any less than which the negative effect that you've been talking about in your thesis? Would you not say that there should be regulation in that area as well?
I believe there could be regulation, but for the purposes of my thesis, I was sticking simply to the fashion and advertising industry. And so while there could be regulations in that industry, I just didn't go into that as much in my thesis because that wasn't really the main focus of my thesis.
Just bringing it back to the fashion and model industry. So I guess what I'm gathering is you would probably be in favor then of models that advertising agencies use have to represent the average of society, perhaps the average weight, the average height. That's kind of what I'm hearing.
At a healthy weight and
at a healthy weight.
yes.
That was going to be my point, is that underweight is relative. The United States has obesity on an all-time high, and it's getting worse and worse every year. And so I would almost say the advertising isn't working to the effect that you're proposing. Because, yeah, sure, 110 is underweight by standards when the average weight is 160. And so at what point is there a moral obligation for advertising to help drive the defining force of, hey, you do need to be healthy, perhaps not anorexic, but healthy, and kind of bring that point up?
I think currently the ideal that's being promoted is underweight and unhealthy, and I think that while it may seem to be influencing people to be more healthy, it's actually not, because it's causing eating disorders and self-image problems. And by promoting a standard that actually is healthy will be more likely to encourage people to be healthy, since what they're seeing is a standard of healthy rather than seeing underweight models, which is very unhealthy.
Good. Right. Thank you very much, panel, and thank you, Celeste.